You a few details of what we have on the dailies this morning, the Sunday Standard and the Sunday Nation. And on the Sunday Standard, we have on the headlines revealed inside story of NASA no-poll threat. This, of course, is what has been playing out since the annulment of the presidential election. And this is NASA coming out to say that without what they have now called the irreducible minimums, there will be no election. But of course, that dance, as if we can call it that, continues between IEBC, NASA and Jubilee, with Jubilee coming out to say that there is no chance that there will be no elections. It is going to continue as planned. And the IEBC has also set the date for the 26th of October. This was a change from the 17th of October, and it was advised by the reading of the full text of the Supreme Court. And after that, the IEBC decided to change the date from the 17th to the 26th for them to be fully prepared as per the requirement of the law. The IEBC is the only body that is constitutionally allowed to arbitrate or to be the referee for the election. So, this particular story is interesting, where we have the Standard delving into the inside story of why NASA may be pushing or having the threat of no polls. And there are several pointers here, as you can see right there. Number one, aside from IEBC changes, NASA hopes to force a crisis where next election is held under a caretaker or coalition government. Remember, we have the Attorney General Githu Muigai, who came out last week to make it very clear that the Constitution has no vacuum. It has no gap. Once a president is sworn in, there is no vacuum until another president is sworn in. However, that is differing from NASA's stand, which has been given by one of the NASA principals, Moses Wetangula. And according to Moses Wetangula, well, the presidential term for the president ceased from the time the elections were annulled. And should there be no elections, then, according to the NASA fraternity, then there would actually be a constitutional crisis where we would have to have a negotiation. According to Moses Wetangula, we would have the Speaker of the National Assembly take charge. But that, of course, has been contested. And there is, depending on which side of the divide one is and how you interpret the law, there seems to be a difference in interpretation of Article 134, I believe, of the Constitution, which gives the direction of the president. Number two, you have Jubilee insisting a repeat poll must be held as scheduled, according to Uhuru, and he stays in office as new president is sworn in. He stays as president until the new president is sworn in. Number three, you have international players who are keen on Kenya's holding election as scheduled. It's understood they are applying pressure for reforms to the poll. So there just seems to be quite a bit of a divide right there. But it looks like what may end up happening is that there has to be some negotiation of some kind. Remember, the problem that we're in Kenya is both legal but largely political. And with political issues, one requires sometimes a negotiating table where there is give and take. If everybody gets their backs to the wall and digs their heels in, it seems like there could be no resolve. But there you go. That's where we are as a country. And that's a discussion, of course, that we're expecting to play out even as the weekend comes to a close today. And even as the week begins, that's likely to take center stage. In the Standard, you have opposition key strategy that risks causing poll crisis. That's on page 4 of the Standard. But also on the page 4 of the Standard, you have Raila's Supreme Court victory opens Pandora's box, according to lawyers. Now, remember, the number of petitions literally rose at the point where the presidential election was annulled, on the basis that it was not credible, it was not verifiable, and as a result, that is the legal threshold requirement as per the Constitution. So, of course, a number of players have gone out there, a number of those who lost have gone to court to, seek redress and find out whether there could be a change in wind and whether possibly a re-election would be held for them or maybe a recount. As per the law, the ballot boxes are to remain sealed and closed for 3 years, and that is unless the court orders for a recount, which is currently what apparently Jubilee is pushing for, and that is on page 7. New legal battle as Uhuru team seeks a recount of votes, and that is a case that is expected to be put before the courts this coming week, according to some insiders in Jubilee Party. And you have the likes of Jubilee Party Vice Chairman David Morathe, who says that is still an option, and possibly lawyers will seek to file a judicial review next week to contest the nullification of the presidential poll, and this may be by virtue of a recount. Now, what would a recount mean? That remains to be debated and seen, because that had not been on the tables yet. But NASA had asked for a recount earlier on when they were going into the petition, but at that point I think it was either denied or not pushed for, but now it looks like Jubilee may be asking for that recount. On to page 8, and billions shillings U-turn that cruise you to the coast in 3 hours. Now, apparently, there is a plan to have a superhighway built from Nairobi to Mombasa. And this highway is not going to be an expansion of the current Mombasa Road, Nairobi-Mombasa Road, but is a totally new highway, which apparently would be able to get you from Nairobi to Mombasa in a record 3 hours. Well, get yourself a copy of the Standard and find out what that is all about. But, well, it looks like soon you could be spoiled for choice as to how to get to the coastal city of Mombasa. Remember, we've also got the SGR, which was immensely popular when it started off. I guess it still is. It was actually difficult at some point to get yourself a ticket to travel to Mombasa on the SGR. But there you go. So it looks like you could be spoiled for choice as time goes on. Now, remember, in the Sunday Standard, you also have Gen Next. And this is basically a pull-out for the younger generation. And it is definitely a recommended read and for your children because, well, it is a Sunday, and normally after most people go to church, for those who do go to church on a Sunday, the others who go on other days. But yeah, for those of you who go on a Sunday, when you get home, it's a good read for your children. There's a lot to do for the kids right there. There's also a pull-out magazine in the Sunday Standard, The Thorn in the Gold Digger's Flesh. Find out what that is all about. Again, another very good Sunday read, and this is mainly to do with the prenuptial agreement, the ban of gold diggers' existence. There are those basically who get married for the sake of the wallet. So find out how that works out. That's what we have in the Standard. Let's look at the Daily Nation, the Sunday Nation rather, the Sunday Nation. And the headline is Tobacco starts probe as IEBC responds to NASA. And the DPP has called for police to investigate officials who could be culpable in the bungled election. Okay, that's number one. We also have the commission writing to the opposition over irreducible minimums and steps taken. There is an expectation that the coalition is going to meet tomorrow to review and respond and the chart the way forward. This is on the irreducible minimum. Just like mentioned earlier, we are in a constitutional, or rather a legal battle, but also largely a political battle. And the thing is, with politics, there has to be some kind of negotiations that take place between the warring or the disagreeing parties. Warring parties sounds like there is war, and we're certainly not in a time of war, but there's plenty of disagreement. So the parties involved need to come to the negotiating table and find a resolve and possibly map a way forward. On page 4 of the Sunday Nation, Jubilee parties plot to overhaul the Supreme Court And again, that is something else that has been playing out. Remember, from the time the Supreme Court gave the majority ruling to have the petition now basically win the day, and that is by annulling and voiding the presidential election. There has been a consistent attack from the Jubilee Party's side of the political divide to the judiciary, the Supreme Court specifically, and find out what possibly is in the plan for Jubilee in regards to the Supreme Court in the Sunday Nation this morning. On page 10 of the Sunday Nation, Raila says no election until IEBC is changed. We are counting down. We've only got 31 days before we get to the election date set by the IEBC. Is there going to be an election or not? Well, according to NASA, they say there's going to be no election unless the IEBC is reformed as per the NASA's irreducible minimum demands. So that again remains a battle that we see how it's going to play out between now and the 26th. Again, remember, Jubilee Party has made it very, very clear that for them, they certainly will not have anything but the election on the 26th. Is it going to happen? Well, time will tell. On page 14, there's an interesting cartoon there. And this is to do with, well, some of the leaders in Africa. And you have one, Robert Mugabe, holding, well, it looks like he's being, getting some blood transfusion or some hospital gadget on him. And he's talking to one Museveni and saying, "You're right behind me, comrade." But the red carpet that is being rolled out, and please note, the red carpet is basically doing away with human rights, freedom of speech, democracy, etc., etc. And the red carpet is no age limit presidency. Remember, Robert Mugabe is over 90 years old, and he is actually seeking another term to become president. So, of course, one wonders how long he's willing to push that presidency of his. But at over 90, one would imagine it would be time for him to retire and allow somebody else to take over. And again, it speaks a lot to do with how well he has handled, because they say the mark of a good leader is one who is able to mentor and bring up one who can take over from him. So that, again, is a situation in some African nations. You have Zimbabwe and Uganda as well, where you have Yoweri Museveni, who's been in leadership for over 30 years in the Ugandan Republic. Now, on the buzz this morning on the Sunday Nation, you've got Jack in the Box. Again, another pullout for teenagers. And also, if you'd like to find out what is going on in the entertainment world, this would definitely make a good read for you on a Sunday afternoon. My passion is to mentor leaders for the future. This is an interesting article, woman to woman, and it is also one that you would enjoy to read. So there you go. That's what we have for you on the dailies this morning. This is Weekend Express. We are now going to take a short break, but do stay with us when we come back. There was a notion that had been given in Parliament, or rather there were some members of Parliament who are pushing for the insurance for their girlfriends and possibly second, third, fourth, whatever number of wives that one has should be paid by the taxpayer. What are your thoughts on that? We'll have that discussion when we come back right here on Weekend Express. Do stay with us.